Well, does anyone know what this is? This is called an extruder. And this is the machine that's used for making breakfast cereals. And this represents extreme cruelty to our grains. What they do is they make a paste. They soak the grains in a little water. They make a paste. They put it in this tank. And then with these side wings closed, they force the grains out this tiny hole at very high temperature and pressure. And depending on the shape of this hole, you get a cornflake or a Cheerio or shredded wheat or any of these types of breakfast cereals. Puffed oats and puffed wheat are also made this way. They will not puff by themselves. They have to be forced at very high temperatures and pressure. Now, Americans eat billions of boxes of cereal every year. This is a huge industry and a very powerful industry. And this industry has convinced the FDA that there's no difference between a grain of wheat, a normal grain of wheat, and a grain of wheat that's been extruded. And if you do a literature search, you will not find a single published paper on this subject, on either animals or humans, on the effects of extrusion, eating extruded grains on their health. That's how powerful this industry is. It's kept everything out of the literature that might even give us an idea of what happens when we extrude these grains. I do know, however, of 2 unpublished studies on extruded grains. One was described in a book called Fighting the Food Giants by Paul Stitt. He worked for a cereal company, and he discovered this study in their files. They had looked at puffed wheat, and they had 4 groups of rats. The first group of rats got normal wheat and water. The second group of rats got water and vitamins. The third group of rats got water alone. And the fourth group of rats got all of the puffed wheat that they wanted to eat and water. The first group of rats lived over a year. No real health problems. The second group of rats lived for 6 weeks. There's a lesson right there. We can't live on vitamins alone. The third group of rats died at 4 weeks. The group of rats that got all the puffed wheat they wanted, they died at 2 weeks. So 2 weeks versus a year. Extruded wheat versus regular wheat. I think there's a difference there. But the FDA says there's no difference. The second study was done by a man named Laurent Zanier, who did not publish it, but he described it to me on the phone. He had 3 groups of rats. One group of rats was fed normal rat chow. The second group of rats was fed cornflakes. And the third group of rats was fed the box that the cornflakes came in. The group of rats on the rat chow lived about a year. The group of rats that was given the box lived longer than the group of rats given the cornflakes. The last cornflake rat died on the day the first box rat died. Now, the rats who got the box died of starvation. They lay down in their cages and became listless, and they just died. But the rats who got the cornflakes became agitated and began to run around in their cages and bite each other and have fits and seizures, and they died of convulsions. And then they did an autopsy, and they found lesions. This is abnormalities in the gut and on the nerves. So there was something very toxic to the nervous system about the cornflakes. Now, in my literature search, I did find one study that somehow slipped past the censors, and it was a microscope study where they looked at the proteins in grains. And the proteins in grains are bound up in what is called organelles, in organized groups or clumps. And when they go through this extrusion process, very high heat and high temperature, they are broken up and warped and distorted. Does it sound familiar? Sounds like pasteurization, doesn't it? We need to be very careful of proteins, especially the proteins in grains and milk, because they are fragile, and once they get warped and distorted, they become toxic. And obviously, in the case of the proteins in grains, they become neurotoxic. Now, here we have a supermarket with a whole row of extruded breakfast cereals, and this photograph was taken in a health food store. And these are organic grains, right? And they don't have any artificial colors. They don't have any sugar. These are good for you cereals, right? The thing about organic grains, whole grains, first they have more protein, and organic grains have more protein than non-organic grains. So the likelihood is you're going to get more of these toxic, neurotoxic protein fragments in the health food cereals than you would if you were buying Cocoa Puffs in the supermarket. And we have a generation of children who starts out each morning eating these breakfast cereals. Do you think there's a connection between the fact that these kids can't sit still in school and have behavior problems and can't concentrate and can't learn, and these extruded breakfast cereals? I think that there's a connection.